Ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime. What's happening? How's everybody out there today? It's Father's Day, right? Happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there. Miss my father every year. Thinking of him today. I made a strong cup of coffee in this KSR mug. So the coffee is strong. I'm well rested. Let's talk about some stuff. I am making a video over the next couple days for this little guy. This is the classic old. Do you say Sans or Sans? SansAmp. 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 This is the PSA 2. This is the sort of classic first design, the original from the 90s, but updated with some stuff. And then this housing that they've been doing for a little while, this little mini foot pedal housing that they do. Sounds really good. It brought me right back. When I first moved to LA, I was in a band that I did a whole bunch of recording with, and we recorded like 50 tunes. We wrote and recorded literally 50 tunes over a couple of years. And we used one of the original little SansAmp pedals for probably most of the guitar tones on those 50 songs. So I was like, oh yeah, that sound. It still holds up and sounds really good. It's the classic kind of all analog, but obviously not tube, an analog speaker simulation little sort of recording device. And I remember back then that the little pedal one with all the little dip switches on it, the other guitar player that I was in a band with, Frank Symes, he used to use that into a high watt that was set, clean, but good and loud. And he used it as his main, kind of overdrive boosting into the amp. It sounded really good. He had a cool tone with it. And we used to play clubs and stuff with that. He would use that rig. Eventually we both got 5150s. We both had 5150 heads, which I probably ended up using the channel one, the crunch channel more like for a Marshall-y kind of sort of quasi thing. But anyways, the recording was all done with that early SansAmp. I've never known exactly how to say it. And yeah, it was always a good device. It helped a lot of people record stuff back then in the 90s, when everybody was still on 4-tracks and stuff. This is like pre-Adat, I think. If anybody remembers what an Adat is out there, I'm really aging myself right out of the gate here today. SansAmps and 4-tracks and Adats. There's Rob. Good morning. Hope you're doing well. Your videos and music blow me away. Hey, thanks, man. Appreciate it. What did I do this week? Video for that Bad Cat amp, which is still, I think, sitting. Oh no, I took it out already because I got another one. Man, I'm just thinking I got so much to do this week, and I got to go to Sweetwater and stuff. So it's gonna be a busy week, but I'm gonna buckle down and get all this stuff done, man. It's gonna happen. I'm headed out on tour soon with Five for Fighting too. And so that'll be good. I'm going to Sweetwater this week for a couple days. There's a lot of stuff to finish before I go. So we'll see what I get done and what gets pushed by the wayside for a few weeks till I get back. But anyways, okay. Let's see. What else? I was over at, it was John Sir's birthday this week. So we were at his place last night having some pizza in his wood-fired oven that he made. It was fantastic. That was really fun. So everybody wished John a happy birthday on his Instagram or something. Kevin actually gave me his son gave me this to use to try here, this decimator. It's like a dual gate that keys off the guitar input. So you run it in front, and then you can also run it in the loop of an amp. I just want to try it for as I've talked about before, this is kind of a noisy room, sort of, RF or electromagnetic frequency wise and stuff. I get stuff in the pickups in here. So I thought, well, it might be fun to try and see how it works. Yeah. All right. Let's see what you guys are talking about here. Do you have any advice for playing in a classic rock trio? Sure. I mean, the number one thing is to listen to the other players. Always balance the volume of the band around the drums. That's a good one. So in other words, however loud the drummer's playing, turn up your amps and the bass amp, the guitar amp, and just balance that around the kit acoustically. And if you can get that all sounding balanced with no mics or anything mic'd or anything like that, start there, and then, put vocals in the monitors or whatever. and that should sound good. Like, just acoustic kit, guitar, bass, vocals in the wedges. Everybody can hear each other. If you can get that going, you're in good shape. Start there. Don't put a bunch of stuff in the PA and turn it up and stuff, and then everybody's turning up louder and like, you know what I mean? Like, start there from that, like Led Zeppelin or the Beatles would have with amps and, just around the kit. Doesn't have to be super loud. It has to be a moderate volume for sure, because it always balances around the drums. You've got that snare drum and the cymbals and stuff, and the way the drummer plays, to me, sets the, you're not going to change the way the drummer plays so much. I guess you can ask them, can you play quieter? Can you play? But generally that doesn't work. So it's like, however loud your drummer is, settle in around that, and then build your sound around that. And it doesn't really need to be any louder and can't really be any quieter. And that's what I always tell people in clubs. And, it's like when you're in there, can you turn the guitar down? Well, you got the snare drum there, man. And it's like, I'm balanced around that. And that's what I'm listening to. So just kind of try and work with that. That's always my thing. Besides that, listen to one another is really important, because classic rock was very dynamic. The guitar players used, the volume controls on the guitars a lot. If you watch the Eagles play, or if you watch Led Zeppelin play, or if you, different kinds of bands, but you'll notice that they get a lot of mileage out of the volume control on the guitar and out of just, pickups and stuff, and not so much tons of pedals. And that didn't really exist back then. It was cool watching the Noel Gallagher on That Pedal Show interview this week, where he was talking about early days of Oasis, and kind of just from almost like they were kids. They were, there was a naive thing going on there where they were just young and they didn't really know about pedals. And there wasn't so many pedals back when they were, there was pedals, but not so many. They plugged into amps and got the distortion out of the amps and turned them up, and that was the sound, Noel was saying, of that band in that room that they used to play in or whatever. And that's how they evolved and became the band that they were. So, that simplicity is key, I think. Yeah. And especially if you want to make it an authentic sounding classic rock band, I play in a classic rock band, the Classic Rock Show, right? And I try and always push us more and more towards that. Like, and it's, we play with amps on stage and stuff but it's like, I try and get us even more in that direction of like, let's do as authentic as possible as we can to the experience of what it was like to go see a show in the late 70s or the early 80s or whatever, and I mean that from a production standpoint, from the way that we play standpoint, and everything, the less, there's got to be some technology involved in order to, do a modern show, I guess. But the less sort of stuff that modern, there become, this is, it's a little bit off topic, but I guess not really. I find with a lot of bands these days, the sort of, well, this is how we do things now, whether it's in-ears or whether it's click tracks or whether it's, things on track. Wolfgang Van Halen's been talking about this recently on his Sunday with Ola chat last week, talking about how he hates tracks and everybody's using tracks, and all that kind of stuff all pulls away somehow from the original experience of what it was like to see the Who or Led Zeppelin or whatever back in, even though the Who used tracks, for Bob O'Reilly and stuff. But you know what I mean? So like, the closer that you can get to that, if you're in a, give people the real deal, I think. And that's cool. If you're going to play classic rock, make it authentic, I guess. I like that. So I can, if you ask me anything sort of more specific about specific things, and maybe I can go into more detail about specific questions you have, but I think that's broadly how I feel about your question. The Bad Cat amp sounded killer. Yeah, I did a little Bad Cat video that this week. Really good sounding amp. It was a nice sounding amp. Sounded nice. The Bad Cat sort of lineage of the amps. I mean, I don't really know the connection, but there was a matchless Bad Cat sort of however that worked out. And when I think of where those amps came from originally, I think of the DC-30. So I sort of alluded to that in the video where I said, it was basically like a hopped up AC-30 kind of thing. And it always had a rootsy kind of, full mids. They were one of the original boutique amps when they came out. Along, we're talking about similar time to Soldano and, maybe was it not was it Victory or no, not Victory. What's the amp brand I'm thinking of that did the Tweed amps? And they make great like 410s and the double deluxe. Uh, I'm spacing on the name of the amp brand. It starts with a V. Victoria? Victoria. Yeah, I was close. Victory, Victoria. It was Victoria Amps, I think was the name of it. THD, you know, some of these companies that came out back then. But anyway, when I think about where those amps started, you know, DC30, I think the 112 they made called an SC30. They had a, you know, there was a rootsy thing. They weren't metal amps, but they had cool distortion. They were, you know, full through the mids more and a little bit more, you know, it's just kind of neat. And that amp has that still in the sound. It's full through the mids. It's kind of refined, a little bit like, but different than plugging into my Comet compared to my Marshall, which it sounded a little ratty in comparison when I went back and forth. And my Comet, the first time I kind of got into those amps, I was like, wow, the mids are so rich. Like there's a similarity of the 50 watt EL34 thing, but there's a richer mid range. And I always found that with my Concorde. The Concorde amps from Comet, they had a real rich mid range for being a dual EL34, 50 watt non-master volume. Right away we think Marshall, I think, you know, is the most common one. But these amps somehow got a more refined through the mids. So if that's not snobby, I don't know what is. More refined through the mid range. Oops. My coffee, when I put it down, hit the mouse, and then I highlighted Ben there. Hi, Ben. What speakers do you have in Fender Super Reverb? I don't own a Fender Super Reverb, but if I did, I'm not an expert. There were these Kendrick speakers that people rave about. The other ones that I love, man, are the like, I'm not an expert in Fender style speakers. I'm a Celestion speaker guy, kind of. I'm a British kind of speaker guy. So I'm a little, you know, when it comes to Jensen's and stuff, I don't know, and Eminence, and I don't know that much about them. But so to that point, I really love the 10-inch Alnico Gold Celestion. And I'd sort of think you'd have a hard time going wrong putting 4 of those in a Super Reverb. They sound really good. As the Celestion 10s are really nice, like the Greenback 10 and the Alnico 10 is super nice sounding. So if I was looking for a replacement speaker, I'd probably go there because they're just cool sounding. But yeah. What's Adat, says Patrick. Adat was it means something different now, but when Adats first came out, what they were was a digital 8-track recorder that recorded on a sort of a high quality VHS tape. What's a VHS? It's a video recorder format from, you know, the 80s. And, you know, so it was like a tape cassette, it was about this big, that you'd put in the machine, and then you could record 8 tracks digital. And ADATs kind of were the bridge between analog recording in the 80s and the early 90s into digital recording and computer recording. Now, so there was a period of time where I would say between 91, 92, and around 1998, 99, where like Pro Tools was just, I remember making the Cyril McCoy's record way back in 1995 or 96. And the guy who owned the studio, which was called Stag Street Studio, it's still there, I think, in Van Nuys. He had a great, you know, 24-track machine. He had a beautiful API board, and we were all working that. He was in the other room working on a rig. The guy that owned the studio while we were, you know, there. He was an engineer and stuff too, and he was in the other room working on this rig with a computer, with a Mac. And I went in there and I was like, what's this? You know, and he's like, I've got this thing called Pro Tools, you know. And it was the original like 4-track Pro Tools rig. It was 4 tracks. You could get in and edit, chop up things and move things around. It was like, oh, what's that? You know, nobody had seen that before, really. And so he had a very early, that was 95 or 96. So there was no Pro Tools or really any computer sort of recording before that. If people were doing, there was digital recording back in the mid 80s on a Sony machine called a 3348, I think it was, which was, and there was probably other machines, but that's the one I remember. It was a 48-track digital machine, big reel-to-reel. So it almost looked like an old Studer or something, like a big machine with a meter bridge and all that. But it recorded digitally on reel-to-reel 48 tracks, and they were probably like $50,000 or something, like back then in the 80s. So a few people made records on those. I remember like the Scorpions and George Michael, and I can remember these records that I was hearing. They were recorded digitally on the 3348. And so that was digital recording in the early days of the 80s into the 90s. But people they didn't sound. There's a sound to those records too that were done on those machines back then with those early converters and stuff. That if you listen to, George Michael, like is a good, like the father figure song, or if you listen to the Scorpions, Love It for Sting, Rock You Like a Hurricane. I believe that was done. I could be wrong, man. I might be totally full of crap, but I seem to remember that was done on a 3348. And there's a certain sound to that record, that Scorpions record. It has what are some of the other songs on that record? God, I can't remember anything right now, but it's the one with Rock You Like a Hurricane on it. Big City Nights. Remember those songs? And there's a certain sound to those. If you go back a few years earlier and you listen to Blackout or like earlier Scorpions, there's an analog warmth to it. That record has a distinctly kind of early digital sound to it to me. It's good, great classic, hard rock songs or whatever, but there's a sound to it. So I think that there were some bands that tried to be early adopters and stuff, and then everybody was still on the fence all the way through the mid 90s and recording with a lot of, there's a lot of analog recording going on still. That's how everybody's still, buying reels and analog machines. So, and I know I missed a super chat there. I'm going to grab that in just a second. So then going into the 90s, this digital home recording kind of came about, and there was ADATs, and ADATs were it was about the size of a video recorder, kind of looked like a rack mount video recorder, and it took a cartridge and you could record 8 tracks on it. Then Tascam came out with a competing machine called the DA88. I worked a lot on one of those, and they recorded on a little high 8 style, like more like a small videotape, and they were, in my opinion, far superior to an ADAT. Way less problems. It was a way more robust format, less breakdowns. The machines, ADATs I had a lot of problems with them in my time using them, and I never thought they sounded that good. The first Blackface one had 16-bit converters in it. They recorded 16-bit 44.1 CD quality, but they had that cold digital. I can remember trying to work on those machines, and the sound sounded all like it was way out here. Like I couldn't get it in my face. Like I was used to recording analog, and it was just, we didn't think about it back then, but analog did this thing to the sound where it just sounded glued to the speakers. If you just got good level, out of a mic pre and didn't, pushing it up kind of hot, but not too hot and everything, you recorded things well. When you played back, it just sounded like in your face, and that was the sound we were used to. So we did the same thing recording on digital. We pushed up the sound as far as we could, which was our first mistake probably, but because you can't go into clipping at all, or it just sounds terrible with digital. Literally, like you get this little pop and it sounds awful, when you clip the converter. So you'd record kind of hot as you could, but that was it. And then we'd listen back and go like, I don't know, like it just didn't have the, the immediacy and in your face thing. It took a long time to figure out how to get back to how to make digital sound, like that. And it also took advancements in converters and, moving to 24-bit and higher sample rates and stuff like that before things started sounding a little better, I think. But anyways, ADATs and DA88. So there was this bridge between like maybe 92, 93, whenever they came out, and about 98, 99, 2000, where that's how people were recording in home studios. They had these tape machines for 7 or 8 years. It wasn't even really that long of a time. But yeah. And then Pro Tools started coming in, by 2002 or 3, I was making the 40-foot Echo record. That was the first record I probably did. It was all Pro Tools. And yeah, that was that. That was that. Yeah. Okay. Quentin's asking, do I remember the Roland VS880? I do. It killed the ADAT overnight. I wouldn't go that far. I mean, it had its adopters, but Roland VS880 was an 8-track hard disk recorder that had a built-in mixer, kind of Porta Studio format. And it was cool. I mean, it had, didn't it have amp sounds built in, like early kind of, some amp models, and it was a great little home studio thing for people, but I don't think people were making records on them so much, whereas they were on ADATs. I mean, like Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette, all ADATs, recorded in Glenn, I'm totally spacing on his last name, producer. Why can't I remember his last name? Because I haven't had enough of this. Anyways, that was an ADAT record. Sounds kind of like it too. Jagged Little Pill is a great example of a record that sounds. It's got it sold a gajillion copies or whatever, but it's not the most rich. There's no analog thing going on there. So the bottom end was, you ought to know, for a track that has 2 bass players on it, has pretty light bottom end to me. And yeah. But anyways, oh boy. Music Life with Arthur says, I worked at a studio where I recorded at lunch in the 90s. It was all state of the art, all DAT and ADAT. A DAT was a format, that digital audio tape, that was like a small little cartridge that we used for a long time to do mix downs to. The Panasonic DAT machine, the white one with the big gray dial on the front. That was in every studio, right? Everybody had to have one of those, and they were cool for the time. Can you capture a Tonex profile of the Bad Cat amp? And it might be a little disingenuous to do that, just because I'm supposed to make they're an amp company, and then, hey, while your amp's here, I'll grab a digital version of it, and then you know what I mean? So I probably won't do that, but that Bad Cat would be perfect for Five for Fighting. Actually, a little too dirty, maybe. Great clean channel, but what I use for Five for Fighting right now is I use a capture of this. So this is more like an AC30, and I use a lot actually, I don't even remember what channel it is, whether I did it of this channel or this channel. This one's more like a AC30 non-top boost, but with the brilliant circuit, and then this one is like a standard AC. I think I did it of this channel, the top boost side, the capture that I did for Quad Cortex. So that's perfect, because I need a little bit of a cleaner thing with Five for Fighting, and then I just kind of hit it with Klons or the Coco Boost to virtual Klon within the thing, or a blues driver, virtual blues driver, or with the Coco Boost, which I actually have a physical one on the board. Yeah, and that works out good. But yeah, I why I went with Five for Fighting to the that is because that's what I used 22 years ago or 21 years ago when I toured with them. I used I used a Top Hat King Royale, that amp, not this particular one, but that I had a combo, and so I went, worked back then, let's try it now. So I did a capture of it because I was intending on using the Quad Cortex with them. Worked great. Very happy with it. Just, it fits right in their tone. The tone of the band. I mean, Five for Fighting is an interesting band because this is a band I'm going on a tour with in about a week. Be on the East Coast and the Midwest and stuff. It's a piano singer-songwriter affair. John plays acoustic on a couple songs, but the majority of the set, 80%, is piano, bass, drums, big voicings on the piano, a lot of movement. Think Elton John style piano playing. You got to find your space in there because there's a lot of sixths going on and stuff, fourths and sixths, and it's fat. So it's like, what do I play? And if you have a big distorted tone, it doesn't really work on a lot of that music. The AC30 thing tends to work, and you find smaller voicings and your place and little parts that are complementary. It's if you ever listen to Benny and the Jets, it's piano, bass, and drums, and you don't need anything else. You don't need a guitar. You don't need anything else. It just sounds like totally full. And yeah, and it's like, so to find your spot in that, which is kind of the job in Five for Fighting, and to play complementary and a few solos here and there and stuff, but requires a certain amp tone, I think, and mostly a certain musical approach. Okay, I'm, as usual, super far back in the chat, so I'm going to hit the super chats, and please, if you ask something, do it again, and then I'll move down to the bottom and get a little more. I'll move it along here a little bit. I recently bought a 1976 four-hole Marshall. Cool. I had a tech put in 4700 PF bright cap, and it's gnarly in a good way. Absolutely. Do you notice the noise floor of the amp being higher? Well, it's not that the noise floor is higher; it's that you're letting all that signal through. So above a certain frequency, everything's getting through the pot. So it's almost like you've got the amp on 10 above a certain frequency. So that's why you're getting all that, you're if you don't have the bright cap, you're attenuating with the pot, and all that stuff isn't getting through. So that's where, and what we hear as noise many times is high end, that stuff. It's a lot of high frequency stuff. And so that's all getting through. And basically with the pot, you're just mixing in all the other stuff below the cutoff frequency of the cap. So that explains the noise. Does that make sense? Yeah. What are you currently listening to? I've been listening to the new Noel Gallagher album, actually. I listened to it on my drive yesterday back and forth to John's place because he lives kind of far. So great record. Few really great songs. There was a song called I'm gonna look it up just so I can tell you, but I love it. Noel, every now and then, for being a guy that on the surface seems very, he's a little brash and stuff like that, he sure does write a good, sensitive, seems like an emotional guy. I don't know. So the album's called Council Skies. And the song that I really enjoyed was Dead to the World. It says Dead to the World instrumental on here. It's not instrumental. Oh, I see. This must be a different. Anyways, it's called Dead to the World. And then Council Skies is also a really, really nice song. And there's some other great ones on there. There's a song called Pretty Boy that has Johnny Marr on it. His work on the end, he comes in towards the end of the song playing this beautiful arpeggiated Johnny Marr stuff that's just like perfect guitar playing. So I've really been enjoying, listening to that, at least for the last couple of days. So it's a cool record. What else we got here? Let's see. Why must we always hark back to the good old days? Well, we don't always have to, but if you are talking about classic rock stuff, I think that was the original question where I was you're probably referencing, and I was saying make it a accurate as possible experience to what that used to be like, because anybody going to a classic rock show is probably interested in hearing that, not moving forward with something modern. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I hear what you're saying. And that's why, I love to, so a great Kenny Aronoff quote this week. He's been doing some good stuff on his Instagram and probably on YouTube, but I see it on Instagram, but the snippets that he pulls out. And he said, the key to staying relevant is staying creative. So even as you get older, because Kenny's 70 now, he looks amazing for 70. And seems like he's, just as vital as ever, but, the key is being creative. So that's how, and I feel that that's true too. If I stopped writing, I wouldn't be that relevant. The thing that keeps me, even if it's just in pedal videos and stuff, if I'm writing stuff and I'm putting out new music of some sort somewhere, people go, that's a cool tune, or whatever. That's all you need to do to stay relevant, is write something that, that people get jazzed on. You know what I mean? And then you're relevant. So we don't always have to harken back to the old days, but it's part of my living, part of what I do to make money and get by. That's why we have to harken back to the old days, because I got to pay my mortgage. But I like to balance it out with, some always, what I do to keep moving forward is I like to hang with younger artists and, singer-songwriters and stuff, and work with them sometimes, and make sure that I'm not, because there's some amazing stuff going on out there, and there's younger people that the thing that blows me away is that early 20s thing, when people, from moving from teens into the early 20s, how good they get so fast, like how within 3 or 4 years they can just become fully formed. But when we think of Eddie Van Halen, or dude was unbelievable by the time he was 21, 22 years old, it just that period fascinates me. And then people seem to, after that, kind of settle into a thing, which is fine, but it's like there's not too many people with the constantly moving forward thing that I've seen into their 30s, 40s, 50s thing. But at least, if you stay creative. I mean, I remember my friend Mark Goldenberg. He's an amazing guitar player. I haven't talked to him in a long time. I actually miss him. I would like to reconnect with him. He lives like not far from where I am right now. I should just hit him up. But that dude, man, in his late 30s, I would have been early 20s. And when he was in his late 30s, he started really studying hard with Ted Green and he put down the pick and started playing with his fingers mostly. And I saw him in his late 30s develop a whole different guitar style. And he was so good and so musical, And that was really inspiring to me then, because I was like, wow, like that's rare that you see somebody in their late 30s advancing like usually what you see people do in their early 20s. It gave me kind of hope that he was very disciplined about practicing and stuff too. And I'm like, how do you have the time, But he did it. He played a lot and he worked really hard. And his discipline always, that was inspiring to me back then. I was like, okay, he was an important guy for me in my early 20s. I got into a good circle of musicians around that time in my early years in LA. I wasn't making money and I wasn't, I was just trying to figure it out and I was just a kid, but a few people took me under their wing that were older and working musicians that were I saw them with careers. They weren't just like in a band and lucked out, got a record deal, had some hits. It wasn't that. It was like these were working musicians. Mark by that point was a, working producer, songwriter. He played with folks like Jackson Browne for years in his touring band and stuff, but he was doing a lot of different stuff, always with his hand in, a bunch of different things to stay working and busy. I guess that's how I ended up where I am. That seemed to be like, I was like, that's how you do it. That's how you're a working musician, have a career. So, yeah. Yeah. Anyways, as usual, I'm getting long-winded. I have a hard time calling Ozzy, Alice, Motley Leopard, and into the 90s music classic rock. How come? It is. It's totally classic rock. Alice Cooper, dude. I mean, he was around the early 70s. So I know what you mean. The later, like, you're thinking of 80s Alice, I think. When I think of Alice, I think of School's Out and, Under My Wheels and stuff like that. That's like mid 70s. But Motley Leopard, it's more like, 80s music. But it's over 30 years old now, The music then, and let me put it into perspective. The music then that was fresh and new in the 80s and 90s when we were listening to that music, it'd be like us talking about music from the 50s, right? So that's how far removed we are from it. So the music of Motley and Leopard, and when they had the big hits and stuff like that, is as far removed as when we were listening to Motley and Leopard for the first time, Chubby Checker or early Elvis, or we're that far past it at this point. I know I sort of put it in perspective, especially on Father's Day. All you dads out there feeling your age. No, I don't know. Happy Father's Day. Okay, I'm gonna grab a couple super chats. What's your take on Kirk Hammett pretty much burning EMGs and saying how great DiMarzio passives are in a recent interview? Really? Did he do that? He used EMGs forever. I didn't hear it, but I'd like to know his quotes. I mean, guitar playing, the fun part, I guess, isn't we're all doing it. It's a search, and you go through different things. I mean, I recently discovered EMGs, a couple of years ago. I was like, what, let me try these. I'm like, I quite like these actually, just the good old standard SA, 85 set or whatever. Terrific. Works really good for a certain thing, So, anyways, it's always just, even a super distortion. I mean, for a long time, I was like, ooh, I don't like ceramic magnet hot pickups. And then once I listened to the super distortion, discover what it is, like, oh, it's got a thing and it does that thing. Like that thing's really cool, different than back in the day. I found them cold and a little, just hard and cold. That's how I felt about ceramic magnet hotter pickups. Now I hear it as being just very full, and different than the, Alnico Magnet with its sort of, resonant peaky mid thing. It's a different thing, but to me. But anyways, I'm grabbing the super chats, I promise. I'm not gonna miss them. Asmund Sellen says, I've got a 100-watt Super Jubilee, been tinkering with the idea of getting a second amp to either go wet, dry, or stereo. Do you have any recommendations on what amp would pair well? Well, if you're going wet, dry, or stereo, you still use the 1 amp as the main tone. So if you come out of the effect loop send of the Jubilee and you go into whatever you're going to split the stereo with, and then you return back to the effect loop and also the effect loop return of another amp, it still sounds basically like the Jubilee because you're using its preamp. If you're coming then into the other head, you're not going into the preamp front end. Generally, you'll go into the power amp return. You're just using the power amp of the other amp. So take that into consideration that, and you could, get another amp that has a loop and a really cool front end and then mix it up, decide to use that amp's preamp sometimes. But generally in a stereo rig, that's why you'll see like Steve Lukather's stereo rig, 2 Bogners that are the same, 2 cabinets. He's using the front end of one of the amps as all the tone. And then he's returning to the effects return of that amp as well as a second amp that's basically the same. So yes, you can split the stereo with 2 amps and use the front ends of both amps, but that's like if you use like a Boss stereo chorus or something, you come out of the left and right out and you go into the inputs of 2 amps. Sure, lots of people have done that, but you can't really do that with a high gain amp, or even a Jubilee. You wouldn't, if you're using it distorted, you're not going to want to run the effects in front and really split to stereo into another amp because, of course, delays and reverbs in front of your Jubilee will sound all crazy. So something to consider, So there's an exception to every rule, and Zach Wilde would be the one guy I can think of. JCM 800s with a Boss chorus in front, splitting right into the front ends of the amps, right? So yeah, he'd probably I think he ran a super overdrive a lot, didn't he? Boss, the yellow one, and then into a chorus pedal with a left and right out going into the 2 amps. And then just be sure you ground lift the one head so that it doesn't buzz like crazy because you'll get a ground loop. But you can ask a more specific question if you want. If you're thinking of mainly using the preamp of your Jubilee and the effects loops, then it's, well, tell me what you're planning on doing. Matthew says that a DC30 from Matchless's Desert Island amp, love recording with it. It's so hard to tame. I need to get a good attenuator, or maybe a Fryette. Yeah, Fryette will work great with it. You can do that for sure. There's Lauren. He says, this Father's Day, I'm thankful for your word ringing in my ears when deciding to visit my dad last month to go spend time with my father. That's awesome. That's good, man. I'm glad you went and did that. And happy Father's Day to you. Hope you guys had a good time. And thank you for the super chat as well. Can you put 4 210 speakers in a Marshall cabinet? 4 210 speakers? I don't get it. You're saying, can you put 4 10-inch speakers in a Marshall? I need you to refine your question, my friend. I play in a 3-man band. I recently purchased the Taurus 3 pedals. That's cool. That's like bass pedals, right, on the floor. It has added a look of depth to our sound, or probably a sound of depth to your sound. Patrick says, I know what a VHS tape is. I'm 35. Sorry, there are going to be some people out there at this point, which to the majority of the people probably watching this will be surprising. But if you were only 30, you might not know what a VHS tape is. I don't know. I don't want to make any assumptions. But yeah. Boy, I'm so far back in the chat, aren't I? So I'm going to move down. Sorry, guys. Long-winded here. We'll try and go a little quicker and catch the super chats here on the way. So ask again if you ask something. I want to ditch the cab mic for live playing, use reactive load IR. Cool. Still using cab on stage and using the through. Do I connect the desk line or mic input? Line. You don't need to go to a mic input because the level out coming out of the reactive load is basically a line level out. So yeah, go into a -10 or +4. You'll be all right. Just adjust the knob on the front of the reactive load to send out. Just make sure you never hit the clip light on the front of the reactive load because it clips pretty early. When that red light starts coming on, you're going to hear it pretty quick. So just stay a little under that. If it's 100 or 50 or 100 watt amp, I find I don't generally have to turn up that knob more than 1/4 of the way up, 9 o'clock. And I'll get plenty of send then going to the mixing desk. Yeah. And you'll be good. Glenn Ballard. That's right, Richard. That's the fella the producer. I was thinking of trying to Alanis Morissette producer. Have you tried Celestion F12 X200 8 ohm? Yeah, these are the full range Celestions. Have you tried them? I haven't. I did a video. So you'll find some videos for those full range Celestions. I was pretty impressed. I dropped it in a 112 cab that I have here, and it sounded really quite good, I thought, with, running a Axfex or whatever I tried into it. I can't even remember what I did, but I was like, oh, this work. Usually you think speaker cabinet's got especially a full range cabinet, it's going to have to be a certain thing. This is a Celestion speaker they made that's a concentric driver. So it's got a horn in the middle, basically, or some sort of high frequency driver, and then the speaker for the bass on the outside. But it looks like a standard 12-inch guitar speaker, basically. And you can put it in any 112. I tried it in a semi-open back 112 that I had here, and it's worked really good. So if you need a cabinet for your your Axfex or your Kemper or something, if you got a non-powered one, pretty damn good. If you got an extra 112 lying around, you might not need to buy a whole speaker cabinet. Just get this speaker. Of course, you need power still. So you could use a powered Kemper into it and use the speaker simulation on. That would work. Yeah. Matt Sorum played drums on the record, I think. Flea did play bass for sure. Yeah, Flea played bass. My friend Lance played bass as well. Like, I think actually you ought to know, I think Lance is playing bass and Flea is playing bass. There's 2 bass tracks on it. Lance is in Mike Campbell's band now, Dirty Knobs. And Lance was the bass player in Don Henley's band while I was in it. I crossed paths with a lot of people that work with that Atlantis band. Like Matt Logg played drums on that as well. And he's an old friend of mine. He played on Dirty Town on my last solo record. Lance played bass, and then other people that came along through that camp. Of course, Taylor Hawkins was their touring drummer. That was his first break into the big time. Yeah, I've got a story about that. I went. This is before I was ever really doing sideman stuff, but I went when Jagged Little Pill came out to the man. I got a call about auditioning for the tour. And I went to the management company. They said, bring down a tape and a photograph 8x10 of yourself and meet with the manager for a minute. So I made a time. I went and sat in some management company's office for about 45 minutes. And I sat there and I sat there and I sat there. And eventually I had to go to work. And I was like, I got to go. Can I, I'll just leave this with you, this package. I'm sorry, I can't wait any longer. I was going to be late for my job at the time. And she was like, the receptionist was like, are you sure you don't want to wait to meet him? And I said, I really can't. I'm sorry. I've got to get to my job. I got to get to work. And I left and I never got a call. And then 3 months later, well, I'm here to remind you, on every radio station, everywhere. And I was like, I guess I should have called in sick that day. Might have been good to hang around. Yeah, so that happened. It's funny, but I do know the dough was low. They were offering like $300 a week or something, like to go on tour. And I remember the classic. My buddy Rob Ladd, who also played drums on that record. I knew 2 of the drummers on that record, Rob Ladd and Matt Logg. And Rob Ladd, because I think he was the one that told me about the money they offered. He said, I don't even leave my driveway for $300. So he didn't go on the road. I don't know who they got initially, but Taylor ended up doing it eventually. And then it obviously blew up and everybody made more money, I'm sure, than that. But yeah. Such is life in LA. Dat, oh man, please, I want to forget the dropouts, etc. Yeah, part of the Adat thing. Man, ADATs. So like when I say DA88 was more reliable, I used ADATs on that Surreal McCoy's record. I finally got a record deal. Yeah, ADATs on that record. Not to record the whole record. We recorded 24 track, but we printed time code SMPTE on track 24 and then locked up an ADAT to do like tambourine and some auxiliary, percussion and shaker, or maybe a background vocal or 2 when we were running out of tracks on the 24 track reel. And you'd be doing a mix and then you'd be listening going like, where's the tambourine? And you'd look over the ADAT, it was like spinning off into the ether, like it had lost the time code. And it was always like, oh God. Or, that you had to clean the heads a lot. And they were just like, I can remember like rewinding the 24 track reel, like doing a mix and okay, let's rewind. Let's listen to that part again. You rewind, you look over the ADAT and it's like still going, and then it'd stop, and then it'd start catching up, and it just cost all this time, like trying to use those things to. Yeah, they sucked. It kind of sucked. I mean, a lot of people used them to great effect, and they were what we had at the time. But I much preferred the Tascam format. I will say, it was far better. So for just the speed and the robustness and stuff, I recorded a lot on a D88. What do I think is the best tube amp for clean and high gain? The Sir PT100. Honestly, that's my answer to that. And with a straight face, I say it, and no, they're badass. Yeah. Any Five for Fighting talk about a new record? Not, but I haven't actually seen John since last year, since the last tour. So the rehearsal, I got to rehearse tomorrow, which reminds me, I got a little bit of work to do today on the music, but that'll be the first time I've seen him in a while. So. Yeah, I think he's got an orchestra tour coming up in the fall. He likes to tour with a string quartet, maybe not a full orchestra, but a string quartet. Yeah. So he's got some touring work at least. Ooh, coming up. Okay, what else we got here? Let's see. Got the ST3000 EVH. Loving it and recording. Wet Dry Wet is so addictive. My son has been inspired to work on a cover of, how do you say that? Belch Ethereum. Yeah, I've never known how to say that word. It is addictive, and it's super fun, and just adds this amazing ambience, and it's one of the best. It's going on my board. After I get back from the Five for Fighting tour, I'm gonna then reconfigure my board for parallel. Let's go into that adventure, and I'll have it on the board. You always tailor your approach to the artist so well. Thanks. Yeah, that's part of it. Actually, I guess you're referring to the comment I made about working with Five for Fighting, the amp I chose and stuff, even in the modeled format. But yeah, you got to think about the big picture, about the artist that you're playing with and what's appropriate. Guitar, your clothes that you wear. I mean, like everything that's part of the sideman thing. What fits in with this style? Well, still being true to yourself, it's a big part of it, for sure. Let's see here. Benny and the Jets, fake audience and clapping backtrack. Yes, Ryan. I love that when the audience fades in and out. It's hilarious. Yeah. There was a question that I wanted to answer here, but I missed it. I'll find it here in a sec. What causes new pots to fail? There it is. A lot of pots suck these days. That's the. I think that, generally speaking, I think the Dunlop Super Pots probably, the Burns EVH stuff, CTS these days pisses me off. I've literally got new pots that have come in guitars, and I'll try using them, and they just within a month, it's like, and you can spray them out, and then they're a little better, and then 4 days later, it's the worst thing I've ever heard in my life. So yeah, I hate them. Yeah, CTS, you suck. Flat out suck. Screw you. That's all I got to say. No, I'm passionate about it. It makes me mad. I mean, imagine if you're an amp manufacturer and you're I talked to Friedman and stuff about this. He's like, it's a nightmare, like trying to find pots that are good. So, yeah, this just sucks. But anyways, they get dirty. I don't know what it is. They're like not. I don't know, like they're not sealed right or so. I don't know what it is, but they get dirty, like, or corroded or something really fast, and then they're all scratchy and crap. Hate it. I noticed that latency affects the speed I can play a riff. Does anyone else notice this? I think latency largely, if you're using modern computers and processors and stuff, is kind of a thing of the past. I mean, like, unless you're using tons of effects in a row that are all digital and you're getting a big cumulative effect of latency. Yeah. Contracted Woo about the CKK SHXC overdrive, waiting for a response. Yeah, you kind of just got to chill and wait. He's a busy dude because he's just one guy, and his website is terrible. So don't even look at the website. That's why I made a judgment call, actually, when I did the video. This is video I put out for this CKK Overdrive last week. I made a judgment call to just put his email. Because if you go to the website, it's like, I'm frustrated. I'm like, this website doesn't work. These links take you nowhere. And then like, I got to dig a little to find the email. So I thought, I'll just put the email. That'll be more efficient and better. Yeah. So he should get his scene together in that way, because he sure makes great pedals, man. They're really good and they sound good. So that's good. You know, he should hire somebody to get his web scene and his distribution and stuff a little more dialed. But like I said in the video, it's part of the charm. Got to hunt a little bit to find him, and then he'll get back to you. And if you get one, you'll feel like it was a treasure hunt, you know? Yeah. Have you checked out the Marshall Studio amps yet? I have, yeah. Yeah, the Plexi combo, as well as the I never tried the JCM 800 one, but I tried the combo and the heads, and they're good. I think they're really nice, actually. They sound good. I'm gonna make a demo video for them coming up relatively soon. So that's coming. All right, let's see here. New Noel record has some great tracks. It really does. Really, really good. I don't like them all, but that's like most of his records, but I like the majority, you know? I love it when he does the moody chord changes. Like there's a lot of, in both Council Skies and Dead to the World, there's this major minor change, and I love that. You know, the like, just that change, you know, going for like a major to a minor, you know, is because I love the interplay. I love the emotion of that. And the first time I ever heard anybody do that was actually on David Gray. First, I believe it's the first song on, I love David Gray. He's a great songwriter. And the first song on A New Day at Midnight does that. And the interplay between major minor. I love the uplifting kind of major thing, how it starts, and then minor, and you go back and forth between the two. It's like, why does a minor chord sound sad? It's like such an amazing thing to me. Like, it's so interesting to me that a chord, a sound of an interval can have an emotional, like an obvious emotional effect that everybody kind of hears. It's interesting to me. So I've always thought that was amazing. But so I love the major minor thing. Noel is misunderstood, says Guitar Sniffer Joe. That's interesting. Yeah, could be. Nice Neil Young cover in the Bose video. Thanks. Yeah, every guitarist should learn to sing. Even little solo acoustic gigs are fun, confidence building way to earn a big cash. For sure. And it's a great skill as a sideman, no matter what. If you can sing a little bit, that could be the push over the cliff to get you the gig, for sure. Yeah. Do you have examples of non-shred stuff and a few ballads? You mean in my music? Sure. I mean, on both my records. I feel like, I mean, not straight up ballads, but, you know, a song like Remember, I don't really consider to be shred. Listen to Remember off my last solo record. That's actually probably one of my favorite things that I've ever recorded. There's a solo that I would consider just more emotional at the end, but it's kind of a ballad, really. You know, it goes all the way from a quiet guitar based piece to, I love that song. I mean, I have to say I'm very proud of it. So Jimmy Ray says Johnny Marr is fantastic. I agree, he's amazing. Our classic rock show alumni Henry has been working a little bit with Johnny Marr over in England. Henry is the keyboard player in classic rock show, and he's one of the most talented cats that I've met in years and years and years. He's amazing. He can sing, he can play keys like crazy, you know, be it organ, piano, or modern synth kind of stuff. He's young, he's like, you know, 30 something, but he looks like he's about 14, and he's also a string arranger. And so anyway, he's been doing some work with Johnny Marr recently, and I'm very proud of him, because I'm like, he's gonna do, you know, great things, I think. And it's like, yeah, it's cool that he's been in there working with him. I think it's terrific. What else we got here? moving down through the chat. Just pick up a set of Thornbuckers to drop in a HP special. Is that a PV? Was intent on wiring it for split, but started to think maybe series parallel. Yeah, I like series parallel. I think it's great because it's still hum canceling. I feel like split single coil's cool, but it's never a true single coil because of the difference in the design of the pickup, because the magnet and the humbucker's under the poles and all that. It's just a different thing. So yeah, something about series parallel I just really like in a 2 humbucker guitar. I think it's a good way to go. There's Matthew with a super chat. You have a wide range of gear to choose from. How do you decide what rig is right for a certain tour? Quad Cortex for firefighting versus amps with classic rock show. Well, the deciding factor with Fire for Fighting last year was we had a few fly dates in addition to a whole tour. And so for the fly dates, I needed to have a rig that I could just fly out and play the songs with for, right, like very small, minimal. For the tour, I could kind of use, within reason. Wasn't like we don't have a truck. It's, towing a trailer and all that. But so there's a space limitation on gear. But I could have taken amps. But I thought, I don't want to have a rig for 20-something shows and then have a different rig for another 3 shows or whatever the fly show. So let's come up with something that works for the whole thing that I can both fly with and use, So the idea with the quad Cortex was like, I could literally fly with that thing in a backpack. And when I get to wherever I'm going, I can either just plug it in direct or I can run it into a power amp. So I bring a Seymour Duncan, like the little guy, just in my backpack, and I'm just running mono on those gigs, the fly ones. And rent a Marshall cabinet wherever I'm going. So quad Cortex, Seymour Duncan, little power amp in a backpack, rent a Marshall cabinet there. And I've got all my sounds and all my presets that are the same for the whole tour. Now on tour, I had like a little Temple Boards pedal board that I also had a Coco boost on, a treble booster, another tuner, a couple other things. But it was basically, I can do the gig without that stuff. So it's like, that was my thinking with Fire for Fighting was, and it worked out great. I mean, the tones and everything are, the way that I configured it by putting my own amp sounds into it and then running the appropriate speaker simulation to the PA and then running a nice power amp and some couple little 112s on stage. I had a really nice sound. I was very, very happy with the sound, and everybody seemed to like it. So, and the other great thing about it for Fire for Fighting is on different stages, John doesn't like a lot of volume on stage. It sounds the same, whether you turn it up, down, whatever. It's not this amp thing. Well, I got this NAC30. I need to turn it up to get my sound. None of that, no attenuators required or whatever. It's just literally on the quad Cortex, the big dial, turn that up or down. And now I've got my sound. So, that was nice. And it just seemed like the right thing. With Classic Rock Show, there's no fly date. I mean, the one Classic Rock Show fly date I did in Malta last year, I used the quad Cortex. So I guess that's my fly thing these days. But for when I'm going over to England or whatever to do a whole tour, UK run of 40 dates, they're kind enough to let me bring the, what I want. And it comes full circle around to what I started off talking at the show at the beginning today about, which is, if you're going to do a Classic Rock Show, like personally, what I think we should be doing for Classic Rock Show for both James and I is 2 half stacks each. You got a backup amp up there then, because if one goes down, you can just use the other one. And I'd like to do 2 412s, 2 heads in stereo with my pedal board. And if he did the same thing, I mean, like I said, it doesn't have to be loud or whatever. Just you turn it, but the fullness of that on stage, plus the look, because it's the Classic Rock Show. That and an SVT and a drum kit in the middle. That's what I always push for, because right now our drum kit's over on the side and stuff. I push for it to be the experience that I remember when I went to see everybody from the Rolling Stones to, I mean, every band that I saw, and I saw everybody that came through town in the 80s. I remember seeing, Journey and the Escape Tour and Red Rider and opening up for them, or Motley Crue or Maiden or Judas Priest in the mid 80s, or the upteen million bands that I saw on all the tours. Everybody had the Marshall backline or whatever, and the drums in the middle and a big old drum riser and par cans and set, like all that stuff is classic rock to me. So that's what I always push for. The more of that we can do, I think the cooler it'll be. So, yeah, sure, you can do a classic rock gig with a quad Cortex. I mean, yeah, it sounds cool and everything, but it's not quite the same as just having a great tube amp up there on the cabinets and a little bit of sound blowing off the stage and the whole 9 yards, like that thing. I really, really, really feel that it's a mistake these days to be doing the total direct thing with no cabinets on stage, both from an audience perspective as well as from a guitar playing band perspective. I don't want to harp on about this, but I've seen enough shows now where I'm convinced it's totally stupid to just have the band completely DI on the stage and all you can hear is some acoustic drums. Unless people get a little more serious about front fills, the PA in the front of the stage or the stacked PA on the sides, at least with cabinets facing in so that the first 10 rows aren't getting the PA, which is now always flowing line arrays, blowing over their heads. It sucks to be down front for a show now. If that's what you're hearing, I hate it. Like, the first 10 rows suck now. You want to be 10 rows back or further for proper sound because the sound doesn't even develop out of the PA until then. So the front fills need to be. So what I'm getting at is like when bands used to have side fills on stage with a little vocals in them and some drums, and then the guitar players had amps, the bass players had amps and everything. When you were up close at a gig, you heard this shit coming off the stage and it was awesome. It was like, it sounded like a band, unless one guy was way too loud or something. But if it was balanced, once again, we're coming back to where I started, balance around the drums with your amps and everything, and then if you're right up against the stage, it should sound like your band. If you take away all that stuff, that sucks. I don't care what kind of music you're playing. If you're playing pop, if you're playing whatever, if you're great, I got second row floor in the middle and you're standing there and go, I can kind of hear the vocals, but the guitar, I can see that guy playing and that guy, and it sounds like a Shreds video. The Shreds video when you can hear the guy, and then you hear the clapping and then the running. That's what it kind of sounds like in the front of the stage with the PA all blowing over. It sucks, man. Like, who wants to pay to see that? Like, oh God, I get so pissed off about this stuff, to be honest, but I'm not even going to apologize for it anymore. Listen to my rant. Damn it. Paul with a super chat. Hi. Would love to see a G3 with you. Doug Rappaport. Doug's great. And Justin. Those guys would terrify the hell out of me. Such a cool trio of hired guns with 3 different rock approaches. That'd be fun. Would be fun. Maybe one of these days. I'd love to do a tour with another guitar player. I actually talked about this with a guitar player, a friend of mine that's from Europe, where we use the same band and we play each other's songs. So like, what if, we went out, because I need another guitar player on my material to support, rhythm guitar and harmonies and stuff like that. So what if we used the same bass player, drummer, maybe a keyboard player, and then we were the 2 guitar players, right? But we play some of that guy's songs and he plays some of my songs and we back each other up and just do one set where it's like split up. I thought that'd be a fun tour. I've never seen anybody do anything like that. Like, what if you had a tour with like, what if it was Steve Vai and Joe Satriani and they backed one another? Like, that'd be cool, And then but they're both on stage the whole time, playing each other's music. I think that's awesome. It'd be fun. And it'd be a cheaper way to tour because you don't have to bring your whole band and your whole thing. You can have the same bass player, same drummer, just do one set, but feature each other's music and back each other up. What a teamwork approach. I love it. Okay. What else we got here? What's up with the Sir Aura in the thumbnail? John did one for you. This is the one that he loaned me for tour, the one that you saw in the thumbnail. It's a prototype. Still have to give it back to him. Have you ever used lace sensor pickups? I had them in I had a Fender Strat, one of those, like it was a seafoam green with the 2-post trim and lace sensors and the, the slippery nut on it. They had like a roller nut or something. I had one of those, but I found the pickups to be very like this. They didn't sound like single coils to me. They sounded very like just kind of weird. I don't know. Wasn't crazy about him. Like, not there was no vibe, is my memory of him. I don't know. It was a long time ago. It's the 80s, early 90s. But yeah. If you're enjoying Noel's new album, listen to the album of Oasis B-sides, The Master Plan. That's cool. I'd like to hear that. I haven't checked that out. Okay, thanks. I'll give that a listen. Active pickups are like hearing studio reference monitors for the first time. The EQ is flat and needs some love. Yeah, I think that I had this theory that I've talked about before that maybe EMGs, the reason they sounded odd to people, especially back in the day, was that you're buffered right out of the guitar. I demonstrated this in the Shure video for the Shure wireless system, the GLX D Plus. That, you know, with EMGs, there's no difference using the wireless, because whereas with even a short cable, it sounds a little different when you're using passive pickups than using the wireless. Just the capacitance that you get right out of the cable. I think that's a huge part of the active pickup thing. I mean, sure, there's other factors too, but I think being buffered with the preamp right out of the guitar and decoupling all that cable, like you're not getting any capacitance, you run a 20 or 30 foot cable after the guitar. I think that has an effect on people thinking that it's sterile, or like there's not going to be any resonant peaks, is there? Like, I guess from the capacitance of the cable making that resonant bump, it's just going to be like a very, very smooth all the way out sound, you know, to the high frequencies. But anyways, let's see what else are we talking here. I'm moving down. Oh, cool. I broke up my rare Dean Elite, and it's loaded with some DiMarzio super distortion pickups and coil taps. Those pickups seemed a bit more harsh in comparison to more modern pickups. The definition wasn't great. Well, they were a big, broad distortion. You know, they had a lot of bass and a lot of treble. And that's, I would say harsh is the right word. Like, to me back in the day, it was like, oh, this sounds a little hard and little like, and then something like a JB had that mid peak where it was like, well, that's just nice, because it's like boosting the resonant peak of resonant peak of a pickup. The JB was, in the upper mids, and it just had that hot mid sound, and it sounded more warm to me, I guess, at the time, compared to a super distortion. But now I understand the difference and stuff. Yeah. Do you know anything about how Eddie used Music Man and Laney amps back in the early days? A little, I mean, not that much, but you see pictures of them with different stuff. It's funny. I clearly have this memory. I went to see him in Oakland on the 2012 tour, and I went backstage, and he met me at the door, and gave me a big hug and everything, and he brought me in the dressing room, and he said, "Man, check this out. Matt just found this for me today. It's a picture of this amp that I used to love, and he goes, man, I haven't seen this forever." And it was a picture of Van Halen in maybe like 1975 or 6. And he had a Sound City 50-watt head. And he's like, man, I love, he showed me this picture. It was like an 8x10 that Matt had printed out. He goes, I love this amp, man. It was like really cool, and I haven't thought about it in a long time. And he showed me this picture with a Sound City 50. I was like, that's awesome. I've never seen you with that, and then we moved on, started talking about something else. So he was using other stuff. I mean, supposedly his old Marshall got lost on the way back from their first Japanese tour, and he was using different stuff like Laney's and Music Man's and stuff. There was the story about that. He talked about it in an interview, right, where it was, lost in air freight or something. And then he got it like not long after, but for a minute he was using other stuff. Yeah. A Laney is basically, I mean, a supergroup is it's pretty Marshall. It's JTM 45 kind of, as I understand it, a little more, but like a little fatter front end and stuff than a lead spec Marshall like Eddie's. But you can modify a Laney to be pretty damn close to super lead. Music Man is a different thing for sure, but Music Mans were cool, man. They had a neat sound, like when that was the Brian Too Loud McLeod amp. So real, loud and pure kind of distortion or something. Let's see. Have you checked out the new Boss delay? Are you talking about the EVH one? I was a big part of the development. So I have, yes. But maybe you mean a different one. Do you mean something else? I wonder. Be more specific and I will tell you. Okay, what else have we got here? What else have we got here? The reason people hate attenuators is because they never owned one. And like all gear, learn to set it up with a rig. Which attenuator do you use? I don't mind some, but I'm pretty sort of picky about the Iron Man's good. The Faustine Phantom. That was a good one. I'm just not crazy about the air brakes or hot plates, or they all the sound too much for me, but your mileage may vary. Yeah. If you're talking about a load reamp like a Fryette, I don't consider that an attenuator really, but I like those quite a bit. That's my favorite attenuation device, even though I don't technically think of it as a passive traditional attenuator. Are you and Dave ever going to do that video on EVMs? We have the speakers, yeah, and I'd love to do it. So just as soon as we can get into it, I got to go on the road, though, so I can't think about one more thing before I leave or I'll go insane. How's your new Taylor playing? Really good. It's beautiful. Mia's looking for a new acoustic. Yeah, check it out. It's a 417, I think it's called. I love it. The J45. You're not talking about amps. You're talking about acoustic guitars. J45 slope shoulder sort of body shape, but with their V bracing and everything. It's a very nice guitar. I love it. I love necks on Taylors. They work for me because of the width. They're a little wider, and I find them, Taylor's like Sir, they just kind of made a better mousetrap. Just great working guitars that look and play great. No problems. I see you're playing Boston in July. Yes, I believe we are. Hope to catch the show. I hope to see you there. What interface do you use? I'm a big UA guy. I have Apollo X8P is my main, and I've got an older 8P here that is also hooked up. And it's awesome. So they're both daisy chained together, so I can have up to 16 inputs, I guess, if I wanted to, although I never do. But I am using some of the inputs on the 8P right now, actually. So I'm actually using, kind of funny, like the way I got my stuff configured right now, I'm using 10 inputs for stuff. Yeah, and it's kind of the first time I've really done that, where I've used it, and it works flawlessly, just hooking the 8P up. But I also am a fan of the Apogee folks and their products. They make really nice stuff too. So I always recommend UA and Apogee generally. Yeah. Okay. What else we got? What else? Oh, I'm asking if I can put 4 210. What do you mean, though, dude, Patrick, when you say I'm asking if I can put 4 2x10 speakers? That doesn't make sense. Do you want to put 4 10-inch speakers, or do you want to put 4 210s, which would be 8 speakers meant for 2 12s without breaking it and rendering the cab unusable? I would just get a different cabinet. No matter what you're trying to do, you're going to have to... you see what I'm saying, right? I just don't understand what you're saying there. 4 2x10s. So my answer is going to be, if I read what you're asking me literally, no, there's no way to do that. But if what you mean is you want to put 4 10-inch speakers in a 212, I wouldn't do that either. I would just get a 410 cabinet from Avatar or something and call it a day, or get something used, if you want to experiment with 10s. Marshall made the 1965 cabinet, they called it. That was a cool little 410 cabinet that you could probably find used out there, and put whatever speakers you want in there. It's the same size as my PT15 matching 212 that has the speakers like this. Yeah. Anytime you're trying to put different speakers in a cabinet, what happens is the baffle is cut out for the 12s, and you'll need to replace the baffle. Well, by the time you do that, it's like you might as well just bought another cabinet. And yeah, you probably will screw up the cabinet doing that. It's too complicated. Glenn Ballard has a Van Halen production credit. Well, he did the 2 tunes in the 90s, the greatest hits. They Can't Get This Stuff No More and what's the other song? Me Wise Magic. Oh. Yeah, he was the producer on those tracks, which are great. Wish they'd made a whole record. Wish they recorded another 8 and just called it an album. Would have been cool. Okay, remember the wonderful days of rolling 2480s and zip drives? That I don't. I mean, maybe I have a vague somewhere in the back of my cranium memory of that, but not so much. Happy with Jubilee sound, but I want a wider sound. I have, for instance, the Boss DC2W and got the EVH delay. I don't get the full potential. Yeah, if I was you, I would get maybe like another Marshall, but maybe get like an 800 with a loop, modern. Just get something a little different so that if you're recording, you can have 2 different heads and kind of have different sounds, but you can use the effects return of both of them. They'll probably both have the same style of loop, I think, and then you can run into both amplifiers, in stereo. Probably what I would do, I would get another Marshall, use your Jubilee as the main amp, come out of the effects send into your SDE 3000, let's say mono, and then go the stereo outs of the SDE into the loop return of your Jubilee and loop return of, say, the 800, and you'll have a great, it should sound really cool. The only problem with the Marshalls, sometimes the loops, like you don't have a volume control over the return. So you're going to want to get an amp. It's probably something you're going to want to try first before buying, if you're not using the exact same kind of head, because you see what I'm saying? You won't have there's no way to control the return volume on the second amp. So that send coming out of your Jubilee, the master is generally the send, and then you're going to go out and hit your effects. You're going to come back into the 2 amps, and whatever that power section is kind of set up, you're sort of stuck with those Marshalls. You don't have a return volume, generally speaking. It's not a return post effect loop, generally, I think, on most of them. That's my experience anyway, on most of them, most of the modern Marshalls, simple ones. I don't know about TSLs or JVM 410s, if they have a, maybe an overall global master that's post effect loop. Maybe they do. I don't know. But most of the ones I've tried, like DSLs and stuff, they don't have that. There's no way to control the return volume. So whatever you're sending out. So anyway, just get something that's the same power. If you got 100 watt Jubilee, get 100 watt 800, and you should be okay. And it should sound lovely. I love stereo rigs. Wet, dry, wet. We've been talking about that a lot lately because of the EVH delay, and it's awesome. But I'm going to actually personally for my rig, I'm going to do stereo. So although wet, dry, wet is addictive for recording here, like the other fellow was saying a little bit ago in the chat, I really enjoy it for recording. But for live, I'm just going to do a stereo setup, 2 heads, 2 cabs, a la Steve Lukather, but I'm gonna run the SDE in parallel using a mixer. When bands track live, have any farts ever made it to a final mix? I mean, sure, there's farts on records, and like Hot Blooded by Foreigner, there's that one sort of slide in the middle where he sounds like he fell off it and then he comes back in at the end, and it's like awesome. It sounds like a mistake to me, but cool. And I'm like, that's cool that they weren't like, let's fix that. Could have easily just punched in and played something else, but I love the rawness of it. Yeah. And there's plenty of mistakes all over live records, so I think it's cool. Let's see. Any idea when the EVH style tracks you did for the Boss video will be released? Well, that's just up to me, I guess, to do. I should do it. But that ain't gonna be something I can tackle before I go on tour. So maybe later in the early fall, something like that. Maybe I'll put them out in a video. Yeah. And just, well, do I release them? Do I just do them as a video? Maybe I'll release them on through DistroKid or something. Just do them as 2 singles or something, even though they're short. Heard Taylor Hawkins talk about how surprised Dave Grohl was when he told him he was interested in leaving Alanis Morissette to join Foos. Really, you're in one of the biggest acts in the world. I guess Dave at the time was probably like, I mean, Foos. I remember when the Foo Fighters. I mean, I remember when Dave made the record by himself. The only other guy was Greg Dooley on the first record. He played some guitar like on one song, I think. But other than that, it's all Dave. And he must have been like, this is just me, just cathartic, post Nirvana. I'm trying to make my first foray into music again, and I'm going to record some songs. And then it became the band that he's done for the last 30 years, almost. It's crazy, it's they've had a long run. It's great, I mean, it's like what an interesting path, he's had. Had Nirvana stayed together, I mean, would there have ever been a Foo Fighters? Would he have ever done a band where he sang? And maybe, maybe they would have just, split up 5 years after that, if Kurt hadn't died. And, it's hard to say, it's interesting, but his life definitely took on a different turn. It's interesting. But yeah, my point being that to Taylor, he must have, he was probably like, my little band, we're just getting going, and then of course it becomes this big thing. You missed out on a chance to get the Atlantis gig. I lost a George Strait gig. I don't know who he was because I was an idiotic metalhead. Got the offer and turned it down. Really? That's interesting. George Strait, man, he was a big artist. Well, yeah, I know how that goes. Yeah, I've had a few. I've talked about them. My close calls was always like, I remember when Chris got in the Foos, I was like, how didn't I hear about that gig? Because I know they did auditions, and I was like, was I on the road? I was probably on the road with somebody. I was on the road a lot back then, so maybe I wasn't in town, or maybe I just wasn't cool enough to get a call or something. I don't know, but I heard about a lot. Like I was at that time, the early 2000s, I was kind of hearing about everything. It was if a gig came up, be like, I want to check that out. Never heard about it, and I heard it was like kind of a cattle collie kind of audition. A lot of people went out, so I must have been on the tour or something. But yeah, that was a good one for Chris as a life changer. He does a great job in that band, man. He when he's got to cover a lot, like a lot of guitar, and it's a big. In watching him play, especially at the Taylor Hawkins tribute, I was like, man, he's playing like all day, all night. He's like he's up there on stage like a lot, and like he had to learn a lot of solos and a lot of big, it was like you had to do some homework, dude, like to do that. So, anyways, did you ever see a Jeff Buckley gig? No, unfortunately, I really regret that. He was amazing. I was late to the party on Jeff Buckley. I didn't really know much about him until after he'd passed away and stuff, and then I went through a Jeff Buckley phase in the early 2000s where I was like, I discovered Grace, and I was like, oh my God, this guy's unbelievable. And he'd been really good friends with Chris too. And I didn't, well, I guess I played with Chris after I went through my Jeff Buckley phase, now that I think about it. When I discovered his music and stuff and started listening, then a couple of years later is when I got the Chris gig. So I was well aware of Jeff Buckley by then. But yeah, I just kind of missed the boat in the 90s for whatever reason, which is odd because I was listening to a lot of great singer-songwriter kind of. I went through a whole phase where I didn't listen to a hell of a lot of rock guitar in the 90s for a little bit. I was more into like singer-songwriters, I would say. Yeah, almost needed to happen, like, and I loved like Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and stuff too, but I was almost like just as equally like I was listening to Neil Young and Joni Mitchell and stuff. So I got out of the whole rock, shreddy guitar thing for a little while, and I just took a different path for a little bit. And, I look like a folk musician. I had hair down to like here, and I had like this big hat that I used to wear. I look like I don't know what, like, it's just a different time. But anyways, okay. Rant Pete, says Ryan. I go on rants sometimes. I do it. Yeah, correct. Jimmy says Dunlop and EVH are the only pots I could find. Yeah, because pretty much all you got out there, other than those, are Alpha and CTS. All those are another company, but excuse me, I don't know what they're called, but those pots are going in my signature guitar. The other company that I can't remember what the hell they're called, but they work great. Yeah, because I was having so many problems with CTS, and Andy says, crappy pots. The wiper doesn't keep enough pressure on the track. It isn't hard to achieve, just bad design and lack of care. Yeah, it's something about CTS. They just went out the window, at some point. But anyways, yeah, pretty good luck with the Burns and the Dunlop Super Pots. As long as they're quiet to me. I mean, I'm not even talking about taper and stuff. I just care because I use the volume up and down a lot, and I don't want that scratchy crap going into my amp. Yeah. I heard a classical player played with his orchestra from over 1,000 miles away with no latency. Yeah, there's ways to do sessions now with no latency. Like there's live tracking. My friend got a drummer that's next door. He knows how to do that stuff from his studio. He can track remotely with no latency. I don't know. He's a super tech guy that is really into stuff like that, and he's got a big brain. And he's not your typical drummer, not a typical knucklehead. Anyways. Okay. Boy, I'm super far back, aren't I, again in the chat? I can see I'm like at least a half an hour behind. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so Canadian. I'm sorry. Rush rules. I agree. Don't they? Yeah, silent stages sound like a Shreds video. Totally. I said that a while ago. That was 20 minutes ago at least. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've heard people at the front of shows complaining there's no band sound, only drums. It's stupid. It's so stupid. It sucks. Didn't anybody hear this? It's like, this sounds so stupid. And if the PA guy's like, I don't want any guitars on stage, and then like, no, we're going to go silent stage. And then they don't bring any PA. Well, you better have some front fills then. I get mad about it. I'm like, didn't anybody think this through before you took all the speakers off the stage? The people in the first 10 rows that are all excited to be right up front are going to go home and go, that sucked. And then none of us will work next year because none of them will come to the gig and buy tickets. Sounded like crap the last time I saw them. Dumb. Sorry. Getting violent. No. As I look, if it's going to be, all I'm saying is, if there's not going to be any amps on the stage, just plan for it. I guess that's what I'm saying, Bring the PA to make sure that there's got to be some front fills. Maybe have some side fills on stage, I don't understand the hatred of side fills. I love side fills. I don't even need a wedge if there's a side fill that's got drums and a little vocal in it, and it sounds great. It's a PA on stage. It makes you feel everything, You don't even, it doesn't even have to be loud. It just has to be there with a bit of immediacy, so you're not just hearing the PA kick back off the walls, which is cool. But I mean, like, for time and stuff, it's good to have side fills, Love side fills. April Wine Friday night at the fabulous Commodore Ballroom. I missed that place. JCM 800s and Les Pauls. That's cool. That's awesome. Who is in April Wine now? Tell me, like, what original guys do we have and who's doing what? I'm just curious. Must be hard to have a lot of confidence in your vocals after playing with Cornell. Yeah. Cornell, Don Henley, Melissa Etheridge. I've played with some great singers, and it's a little hard to call yourself a singer once you stand next to people that are like, that's been a part of my, it's like, that's a singer, but, little Chiyoshi. I mean, all these singers that I play with that are pretty epic, a lot of them like killer voices. So I'm real lucky, but I also learned things from them. They're not always perfect either. So that was good to hear, Yeah. Yep. Okay. what else we got here? Let's see. I've seen reggae tours where there's a bunch of different artists and one band backing all of them. That makes sense. It makes sense from a pacing perspective and also just economically. There's a lot of reasons to do it. I think it could be really cool. Less gear, less travel, less people traveling, less hotel rooms. I mean, it's like, if everybody's good musicians, I think it would be really cool. Well, that's interesting. Pliny and Aaron Marshall did a tour like that, where they played each other's songs with the same band. Well, I can't come up with anything original. Damn it. No, it's a good idea, I think. The Fishman Fluence don't sound quite right to me. What do you think? They've got a lot of advantages. I've got one guitar with Fluence, and it's very, very quiet. I like it, and I love having the switch to go between high gain, modern pickups, and a more vintage sort of voicing. Do they sound exactly like my, Thornbuckers? No, but it's a useful tool still, yeah. Eternalism says studio monitors aren't flat. Each sounds different. I would agree with that. Although there's a lot that if they're good, they're sort of in the same ballpark. Like I find I can move from Gentle X to those Neumanns. They're quite nice for small. I use Adams, totally different tweeter design and stuff, but Focals, there's a lot of good ones out there that I've heard that I really like, that are really nice. So it's moving from slightly different color to color to color, with the different monitors. But yeah, I agree. They're supposed to be flat, and then you listen to them back to back. If you've got one in one of those rooms where you can audition them all, it's like, well, that sounds different than that. Which one is flat? It's true. Yeah, you got to get the volumes to be very close too, because that can really affect your perception of, if even if one is 2 dB louder than another pair, it can really throw you off. Well, that sounds better, whatever, So it's a hard one. But ever use a Provenance delay? I do have one delay here. It's the kind of the pink one. That's a digital, and it's quite nice. I do have one here. Yeah. It's kind of pink red. Fuchsia, really. Let's call it fuchsia. Have you tried stage right amps? I have not. Don't know that one. Had a chance to hear Lukather's new release, just the little clips that he put out on Instagram, and then I went and listened to the single that came out like about a month ago, which was cool. Awesome. Love Steve. Yeah. Eternalism, yeah, says I demoed Frequent in the store, some interesting sounds, but can't do the same as real feedback. It's very important how you set it. It's not exactly the same as real feedback, but you can get really, really close. So I find the last two settings, there's the rotary switch that lets you set the interval. The second to the last setting is the one that always sounds the best to me. I don't know what it is, but it's like kind of a mixture of the root and an overtone or something above. And you need to set the volume very carefully. And you need to set the onset carefully. So the volume for me needs to be up around the level at about 9 o'clock. And then the onset, which is how quick it fades in and gives you the feedback, that could be around 11 o'clock. And then you get a very natural kind of feedback with it that is pretty close to, you can get, there's a lot of parameters there. So you can, if you mix that stuff up, it doesn't sound the same as natural feedback, but that can be neat too, because you can get some sounds out of it that are totally weird. Did EVH ever kiss you on the lips like he did with Nuno? No, but right here. Right there. He was a kisser and a hugger, He was very I don't know, man. He just wanted to feel comfortable, I think, was what it was. And if he liked you, and if he felt like that guy had a big heart, and he wanted to feel, he was a complex dude that had a lot of I don't know, it was an interesting character. He was a total artist and not a lot of filter. And if he liked you, he wanted to connect. He wanted to feel safe, I think, with people. And if he felt safe, if he felt like you weren't kind of dick him over or use him or, that kind of stuff, then he really cared about you. That's how I feel about him, that he was a unique guy. There was a endearing, it kind of made you forget who he was, because he was so a little quirky and stuff. And then but then you were like, oh, of course he is. He's Eddie Van Halen, He's like, he had like the endearing quirks that were like so interesting. I'm sure Nuno would say probably the same thing. Like he was a character, you know. Yeah. When's that PT50 coming out? You're killing me. You'll see next year. Like, don't get overly, but it'll be like, you know, we're making progress and stuff, and John's been working on it, and it's going to be cool, man. And he's moving to when I talk to him, I don't bring it up a lot because I don't like putting pressure on him or feeling like, you know, but he'll bring it up and go, so I did this today on it and stuff, and I did this today, and it's like, okay, cool, and that's awesome, you know. And it's, you know, he's got a lot on his plate, so it sometimes surprises me when he's like, I worked on this, you know, or I'll call him and he'll be like, I'm working on the back panel right now, you know. I'd be like, cool. So I think he's excited about it. It's going to be cool. I can't promise, you know, we can't, but I would say, you know, the goal is NAMM time, you know, is to have something to show, you know, by then, which would mean, you know, a lot of work between, what are we, June now? So we'll see where we get by November, you know. Yep. Don't hold me to that, but that's the goal. I only use Supergroup and a modded Rangemaster for the OG Sabbath albums, for sure. That's all true. Yeah, I'm so back in the chat, aren't I? Taylors are the most consistent. Yeah, super consistent, for sure. Did EVH use pedals to boost his leads? And if not, did he just keep his rhythm and lead tone the same? He was a volume control guy. So yeah, volume knob to clean up, but boost for leads. No, he just had one great hot sound that he just, you know, I mean, you saw him move between, he was like Hendrix, where he'd move between lead and rhythm with ease. And he wasn't like hitting a pedal when he did that, you know. Maybe in the later years, he used, you know, blue channel, 5150, red channel for hotter things. I don't know. I'm not really sure. But, you know, for the majority of his career, he just had one great sound and he just played with that sound and then manipulated the volume control and hit a couple simple pedals. And that was really it, you know, with obviously later live, you know, the wet, dry, wet thing and stuff, and for some a little bit of ambience. Did you ever take those IEMs on the road that you did a video on? Yeah, I've used them on the road with both Five for Fighting last summer and Classic Rock Show. You know, I've got some other ones here that I could show you. Where is... Just a second. I want to show you something. Recently, I was contacted by Ultimate, and they said, we'd like you to kind of review something, make a video, and we'll make you some ears. And I said, okay. So, Ultimate Ears, with my name on the box. Oh, very nice. These are UE... I'm not sure what they call them, but the professional, these are the top flight, top ones that they make. And so I recently got them. And they asked me to check them out at NAMM. I listened to a set of generics. And I said, okay, I'll check these out. And so there they are. Look like your average, you know, regular inner monitor. These have, I think, 21 or 22 drivers in them. Which is pretty wild, right? Most in-ears will be a 2-driver, 3-driver, maybe 4, 5, 6. If you get a real top end one that are supposed to be, you know, whatever, they'll be like 12 drivers. These are like 22 drivers per side. And that scared me when they told me that. I was like, my experience with them is that when you get more drivers, you generally get a lot more bass. And that's about it. That's the only difference that you hear is tons of bass. And I was like, I don't like that. I got a set once that was a company's top end in-ear. And they came and they were about $2,000 or something, and I got them and they came and I hated them. They just didn't have any clarity through the mids, and it was so much low end that I couldn't hear what the heck was going on. I explained it to them. They said, oh, it's too many drivers for you. Probably would like our such and such model that's only 5 drivers or whatever, and it's got more mid-range. I said, okay, and I got those. Those were great, fine, you know. So the UEs that kind of sounded similar to that to me were UE7s, which I used the whole time touring with Chris Cornell, and they were 3 driver UE7s. It's good. The standard, they're about $700, $800, I think. A lot of you out there, if you've used in-ears, you've probably got a set of those. They're a good kind of mid-price. That sounds like a lot of money for in-ears, but that's about if you get a custom in-ear, the $600, $700, $800 is about where they start for when you get the custom molds like these are. So anyway, these are quite expensive, and I found them to sound really fantastic, actually. So they have a balanced thing. They're not just low end, long story short, with the 22 drivers. They're not just more bass. They are super full all the way through. And when I directly compared them to UE7s, the mid-range sounded way more detailed. So like guitar tones was way more. The UE7 sounded like a less expensive speaker or something. I don't know how else to describe it, with less, like a little more, not fake, but great. I used UE7s forever, and I really liked the mids on them and stuff. And then I listened to these, and it was like, wow, everything is like almost like audiophile, like super balanced. So that's what I've found about these. They're a traditional in-ear. They don't have any, there's no vent or any kind of ambient thing or anything like that. But if you're a mixing engineer or you're a songwriter on the road, you're working in hotel rooms, you're also playing live, you want to reference, it's like they sound damn good, man. So I'm going to make a little video about these, just kind of a fly on the wall out on the road video and stuff. Because I used them a bit on the Classic Rock Show gig I did last month or 2 months ago. Month ago. I don't know when it was. Anyways, I used these for a few tunes and checked them out. And then I've also been just listening to music on them, using them, because many times when I'm on the road, I need to do this, or I need to do videos where I'm finishing up things. I need to mix. Like there's all kinds of instances where I'm putting in-ears in that's not even just playing live. It's like where I'm doing recording stuff remotely and stuff. And this is what I listen on. So anyway, UE Pro, I think they're called UE Professional or something like that. I got to remember the name of it. I'm gonna make an official video for them and stuff. And I still love my ASI, the ones that have the ambient feature. That's a whole different thing, because that's specifically to get the ambience for live and the extra pack and all that. So those are great too. It's almost like a different reason, Yeah. Okay. I finally got a Power Station 100 watt this week to replace my captor. One of the best purchases I've made in a long time. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a terrific unit. It's a really, really good piece of gear for sure. You seem to like Marshall sounds. Do you own any tweed fenders? I don't own any tweed fenders. The closest thing that I have would be my Sur Ombre, which is more like a brown fender, which is the bridge between tweed and blackface, But the Ombre is like basically a brown deluxe. It's not worlds apart from a tweed deluxe. It's like, it's right in the middle of a tweed deluxe and a blackface deluxe, which is a lot cleaner and more scooped in the mids. True tweed, a little too, like, I love a tweed deluxe, great sound. And the amps I mentioned earlier in the show, the Victoria amps, they made an amp called a double deluxe. That was a double power 4.6v6 twin 12 combo in a tweed thing. That thing was great. Like, I loved the sound. But a 12 watt deluxe 112, cool sound, but it's just not really my thing. I much prefer the Ombre, I think, which is a brown deluxe. That's a little tighter, little less. I'm not a big fan of the super loose tweed thing. Now, I might like a high power or maybe a low power tweed twin. I see, Bonamassa and different people, and Keith Richards, using the tweed twin thing is something I should explore. And I like a Bassman, but a Bassman's kind of that JTM45, 410. I think one of the best amps, if you're going to get a touring amp and you just want to plug in and play and use pedals, Bassman, like the 410 LTD or whatever. I toured with a guy that had one. It was like a terrific sound with he used a full drive in front of it. And it sounded great, for plugging pedals in, and about the right volume for, 3 or 4 piece band on stage. It was real cool. So, I just haven't really gone much. I would say probably the higher power stuff, like the Tweed Twins or a Basement. I bet if there was a real pristine example of one of those, I would probably really enjoy playing through that. But I haven't done it a lot. Yeah, Mornington, such a Marshall kind of nut. Don't you have a UA plugin amp? I think I used it. Yeah, although it's available off the UA platform now too. You can just get it for native for anything through Brainworks. But it started out being UA exclusive for a long time. The PT100 plugin. Yeah. What time is it? About 1:34. I'm gonna go split pretty soon. I'll hang around another 15 or so. We've gone about, it's right then we hit the 1:45 point. So I'll go about 2 hours today. And then I'm gonna I got a lot of stuff to do. 3 things I gotta do today. Go over some music for rehearsals tomorrow, do a video for a product here, and then also work on something else that's like a session thing I gotta do. So busy Sunday for me. Let's see what else you guys talking about. As a teenager in 73, I bought a Marshall 50 with 8 10s. That's cool. That's a bitchin' cabinet that the guy from what's the band? Oh man. Down to the down, the down to the down, the down to the down. What the hell is that band called? The Black Keys? Yeah. Doesn't he use one of those? With the 810s. It's a cool cabinet, cool looking cabinet. They're rare. They're expensive now, if you can find one. Okay. Speakers in my old trainer cabinet aren't working. Good speakers got expensive the last few years. We were talking, I think it was last week, about speakers, and I went and listened to a bunch of videos on Fanes. The only one that I heard that I really kind of liked was the F70. I thought it sounded really good. Do you guys have any other opinions? The greenback, the 25, sounded really bright to me compared to a Celestion. The H30 sounded bright to me compared to even an anniversary Celestion, which I think of as kind of a bright speaker. The F70 compared to a V30 sounded really good to me. Had a richer, more just cool sound. So what do you guys think? Does the SDE 3000 have input and output volume control independent between right and left? Input is not. I can't remember. Let me take a look. I got it sitting right on the desk. Let's take a look and see. We'll plug it in and power it up, and I'll get into the inputs and output section. Let me just say, rest assured that I think it has everything you need to adjust such things. But I'll just take a quick look here. In and out, in mono, out stereo. I've got it set. There's a unity gain. Yeah, there's an input volume that's the same for both sides. There's the DSP. So there's a master input. You've got a separate control over the direct level output, and then an out gain. So it's going to be not separate for each side, but you do have separate for the direct, and separate input, separate output. And then you've got a mix that if you've got it in parallel, so a different delay on each side, you can control the mix independently of each of those delays. Does that kind of help? Okay. Wow, I'm pretty far back in the chat, aren't I? Jeez. Tell you what. Great t-shirt. That store is lethal, says T-Top. You know this shop. It's a good shop. That's where I got my old telly. It is lethal. Yeah, you'll go in there and be like, 55 Les Paul Gold Top. Pretty good price, maybe. Especially now, the yen to the dollar. Man, it's rough on them right now. But if you had American dollars to spend over there and the guitar was the right price, it's a good time to buy a guitar. Yep. What else we got here? Let's see. Teammate says Eddie was a sensitive dude more than most folks realize. Pete would know best. You can't write music that well, not have a huge amount of emotional depth. Yeah, Ed was a, I think, but yeah, absolutely. It's like I said about Noel earlier. It comes off as a little like, tough, but then you listen to the songs, you're like, kind of sensitive dude. Maybe misunderstood, like somebody said earlier in the chat, maybe. But yeah, Ed was he was a sensitive dude, I would say. Yeah. Going to listen to Van Halen 3 again. I wish the second Gary Sharon record with Van Halen would have come out. Yeah, when you listen to that record, there's a lot of really long songs on it. Like pushing 5-6 minutes, or no, maybe not a lot, but a few anyway. And if you listen to it with the perspective of these are demos, maybe, because that's what I tried to do. And I go, oh, okay, yeah, that's a cool idea there. And that's a cool idea. And it was just like, I think the thing with Van Halen was, this is just my personal opinion, but there's a lot of people I've heard that have sort of said this, is that, and even Ted Templeman, whose book I just finished, between him and Dave, they were like, those guys were really good editors and arrangers. Ted, through reading his book, you really realize what a song guy he is, that he was so into songs. And, when you listen to the Van Halen, the early demos is Zero or the other one called, Less Than Zero, those early demos, and how different the songs are in the parts, and then how they ended up on the record, and you realize, well, somebody went in and helped arrange all this, that's the thing, and so maybe, that element, I think, is the thing with Van Halen, there was everybody had their role, and for, whatever you say, what you will about, because I'm firmly in the Van Halen camp when it comes to, Van Halen and any kind of, whatever, like goings on, but everybody had their role, and Ted's role and Dave's role, and it's all chemistry, and they were very important to the that thing. So when you take that away, maybe you got Van Halen 3, but when you listen to it and you go, there's some little gems here, it's just hard because as listeners, we don't want to dig too much. That's not the thing. You want that work to have been done for you before you get there as a listener, and you want to listen to it and just have it be great, right? Well, sometimes, whatever happens with records, but it's fun to go through and listen to things that maybe got panned earlier, to go back and listen to them and go, is there, what's going on here? And then like, oh, that was cool right there, I could hear this, and it's like thinking like a producer or whatever, I guess. Did you ever meet Randy Rhoads? No, God, I would have been like 10 when he passed away, or so, 11 maybe. So, no, I did go to the show, that tour, and I saw Brad Gillis play because Randy had just passed away a couple months before that. So, but we had bought the tickets, I think, it was that thinking that, we were going to see Randy. And of course, terrible thing happened. And that was horrible, but have you played a Malmsteen scallop neck guitar? No, but the Strat that I brought up earlier, I mentioned a Strat that I had lay sensors in it. Somebody asked me if I ever played lay sensors. The Strat, I scalloped. So I turned it into a Malmsteen guitar, sort of. But I've played them. I picked them up in stores and played them. Yeah, I like them, actually. I like scallops. I mean, I love big frets, so, and I didn't have a hard time playing, I don't have a hard time with big frets and stuff. So, yeah. EVH and Gene Simmons had very similar life experiences, both being immigrants to America. Both were bullied for not knowing English and found music, and it became their everything. Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. It explains a lot about Van Halen, and yeah, maybe Gene, and I think Cornell, to a large degree. These are introverts that spend a lot of time practicing their craft and learning instruments, and then they get out play live, and all of a sudden they become these like super popular, and they're like maybe a little socially like uncomfortable with that, or I don't know, like some, what I mean? Like maybe Gene wasn't, but what does that do to a person from an early age? And then, that's your like, I don't know, it's interesting. You know what I'm saying? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Straight out of Serotonin says that you use 64s. Mine only have 3 drivers. I think for a lot of people, I mean, 3 drivers is, that's, and 64s are great, and they probably sound really good to you, right? I mean, they're, it's fine. With in-ears, I do feel like there's a lot of, like, how much difference is there between the 3 driver and the 4 driver and the 5 driver and the, you know what I mean? There can be a lot of hype in the in-ear world, for sure. So it's just something to be aware of, but it's just kind of interesting. But is the PT50 going to be a smaller head? I'm shooting for a small box style, so the size of a Marshall 50 small box. Think SL67. That's the size that I'd like it to be. So smaller than a SL68 or a big Marshall, for sure. Smaller than the PT100 by far, and lighter. Yeah. Yeah, Zigbert says being subjected to bullying as an immigrant's big reason EVH and Alex became so close. For sure. I mean, imagine coming to it's the mid 50s, right? And you move to, America, and it's probably rough for those dudes, and that, yeah, they spend a lot of time jamming together and then rule the world, just like, we're going to show you, How did you get to play with Big Rec? I never played with Big Rec, but I played with Ian. Ian was a Facebook friend. I never met him or anything, but he's a very approachable, sweet guy, and I contacted him on Facebook one time and said, have you ever played Sur guitars, And he's like, no, man, I've been wanting to try those, but I haven't found them up in my neck of the woods, like up in Ontario at the time. So, after that, I said, well, let me hook you up with John. And John started listening to Albatross because it had just come out around that time. And so I'm just trying to think of the way that it happened. So then they started talking, and then Ian came down. They hooked him up with a guitar or two, maybe an amp. He liked them. Ian came down for NAMM. And when he was coming down, I had introduced him to John and Sir and stuff like that. And I said, hey, offer, if he wants to come down. It was when Sir was doing their NAMM shows, like the concerts and things, like around then. And I said, if he wants to come down and play, tell him I'll help him put together a band. I would love to, if he needs some help or anything, if he's just coming on his own. And he took me up on it. He was like, great. And he was so like, what do you want to do? And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, what do you want to, like, you pick the songs. I wouldn't know what to do. I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. And I was a big Rec fan, and I was like, oh, so I just kind of picked 4 or 5 tunes, and he was like, great. I'm like, I think I just put together this show where I get to play with this guy that I'm a fan of, and I got to pick the tunes, it was really fun. And he was so cool, and just came down and set up. I remember the day, the sound check, it was like he was playing through an amp that he wasn't familiar with, pedals that they'd put together a little board for him with a delay and overdrive, maybe a compressor. And I'll get the game. He came down with nothing, no guitar, no nothing. So when you see those videos of us playing Blowing Wide Open or that song, he's just like, that gear is all borrowed from Sir. Everything. Probably didn't bring a pick. And he played and sang perfect, Now I put together a little band with Blair Cinta, he plays in Fits in the Tantrums now. He's awesome. John Button, who's in the Who. I mean, it was a good band, but we got together and did 1 or 2 rehearsals. That was it before Ian came down. And then that day we just did a rehearsal at Soundcheck, and then we played the show that night. So that's what you hear. It was very thrown together, and I love how it turned out. And that was really all on Ian, I mean, we're backing him, but it was Ian. His ability to come in and get comfortable with a group of people he'd never met, gear he's never played, sound he's not familiar with. And it didn't actually, the sounds on stage wasn't terrific, like the monitors and stuff. And sing like that and play like that. Wow, what an amazing pro, So it was incredible. Really fun. So I'm about at 2 hours. I'll go another 5 minutes here. So I got to grab that super chat there. Did you ever dig 410s? Ever use them on a club date? No. I've got a Princeton here with 110 in it that I've used a little bit. I used it at a gig last year. I think 410. My first cabinet that was kind of I play. Okay, yeah, sure. In the 80s, when I was 16, I had a Marshall 410 with a little 100-watt Marshall MOSFET head. I played clubs with that, or gigs, high school. Played my junior high with it, I remember. That'd be the last time. But that's a minute ago. Yep. Okay. Have you ever used Fractal? Yeah, I did a whole tour with Melissa Etheridge where I used Fractal into a tube power amp and a cabinet on stage. And we would rent cabinets locally, Marshalls. And then I also ran the second set outs with speaker simulation to front of house. And that was, pretty cool. So, are you familiar with Avatar speakers? Got an M65 from a friend, supposed to be like a greenback, putting it in a 112. I'm not familiar with the M65 either. That was the one I didn't really find clips of the day I was listening, but I should go listen to that one. M65 and the F70 are the ones I'm most interested in. So I'll have to give that a listen. Ever use the SAG control in the Helix? A little bit. It's pretty subtle, but it does something, doesn't it? Yeah. Don't forget the Beatles AI album will be released in cooperation with Paul McCartney. It's not really AI. The Beatles thing is similar to what they did with Free as a Bird and the songs they put out in the 90s. It's a song that evidently there was a cassette that after John died, Yoko gave to Paul, and it said "For Paul" on it. And it was song ideas. So isn't that amazing? Like, I don't know, as a Beatles nut, it's like, oh, what could have been, but anyway, she got this cassette to Paul. He's had it forever. And it was I don't know if it's guitar and vocal, but through AI, I mean, you can find these apps now where you can isolate things and it'll separate the drums, separate the guitar, separate the vocal, right? You can pull things in and out. There's a lot of apps that you can get that do this, and it's great for learning things and stuff. And it's amazing. That's AI technically. That's sensing that. Well, that's what it is. It's a cassette of him singing a song, and they've used some sort of pro app like that to separate the vocal, and then they've now recorded another track, using that vocal. So it's not like it's imitating his voice like we've heard of some of the AI stuff where it's like a recreated. Like that thing was going around with Paul with the song New, where it's Lennon singing one of the verses. And it's like, that's true AI, where it's like, they've programmed the voice to do the part or whatever. And it sounds like John, that's different. That's not what this is. This is just literally just cleaning up the audio and using his actual voice. So not totally AI, I don't think, more akin to the songs that they came out with in the 90s. A little bit overblown, I think, the AI aspect of it. AI to me would be like, okay, we're going to write new Beatles songs with, where you put the, bunch of Lennon vocals isolated into it or whatever, and it learns how to sing like him, and then you play the notes, or you sing the part and then you play it sound like John, and then it's John singing the part because it puts his vocal inflections on it and stuff like that. That's, to me, would be a different thing. And that's not what this is. So, Peter, a bit late to another great Sunday show videos this week. Hi, Peter. I am going to do a video on this guy, the PSA 2.0. This is the classic updated, though, SansAmp, analog preamp situation. And it sounds really good. I've also got an amp here called a Driftwood, and I need to do a video for that. If I can possibly get it done, it's going to be a rough, like this week's going to be crazy, but I'm going to try and get that done before going away. So that's the next couple that I've got in the works. I'm going to Sweetwater this week to do a couple things. So it's a Sweetwater Gear Fest thing this week, and I'm going out there and I'm going to film. I've got plans to do a couple videos in their studio on some exciting things, some amps, some microphones, some different things. So that's going to be fun. See some friends out there and see what else transpires. I'm sure some things will kind of, transpire that, who knows, that's on the fly sort of creative stuff. So we'll see. And then I'm back here for a couple days. I'll finish up some videos and stuff, and then I got to go on the road. So that's the plans. There's a super chat right there. Rich, thank you, sir. Brad Gillis on Speak of the Devil was excellent. He did a great job coming in last minute, and that's a tough situation, and what are you going to do? He did the best he could, I'm sure, and he was great when I saw him live. Thank you, man. Thank you, Rich, for the super chat, and thank you, Peter, for the super chats. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for being here. Music Life says, definitely looking forward to the PT-50. Me too. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. All the way to the bottom of the chat here. Busy dude, says Zigbert. I am. It's a busy day. Yeah, I should probably run and get some stuff going. But yeah, Blue Sky says, I'm wondering how the SansAmp was holding up against the modeling competition. It still sounds really good, and it's all analog. It's got a certain sound to it. It's a mid-rangey kind of warmth sound, but when I plugged it in, I quite enjoyed playing through it. So I give it a go, and this thing, I remember this sound, and it holds up pretty well. So video on that, try and get that done over the next couple of days. Yeah. Artificial intelligence is no substitute for natural stupidity. I like that. Maybe we should leave it there, right? Well, a couple more amp questions. What are your top 3 most versatile amps, 2 or 3 channels for the average local musicians that gigs locally 3 to 5 times a week? I mean, dude, you want a PT-15 for sure, because it's so easy to, from gig to gig. It's light. Is what it is. But PT-15, let's say. But beyond that, versatile 3-channel. Besides my amps, I mean, I like Dave Friedman's amps a lot. I think something like, for a lot of people, the Twin Sister, or the 2-channel, the small box, great amps for if you're in the Marshall camp and you do some classic rocky stuff, but you need a clean channel. Those are really good. If you're a metal guy, the 5150 stuff, the 50 watts, or the what else? Just thinking multi-channel. You're asking a little bit more average local musician. I'm not sure if that means you want like a little less expensive stuff. I just did a video on that Bad Cat. That was a nice amp that would work great for local players, but it's a little more boutique, I don't know. You guys discuss amongst yourself. That's a few ideas right there. That's what I got for you. Super Reverb is a 410. Yeah, Super Reverb was always a 410. It was a 45 watt, 50 watt, 410. Yeah, Christian says, saw Big Wreck a couple weeks ago in Philly. They were great. Yeah, they're awesome. Super fun. Last time I saw them was terrific. Trey, thank you for this amazing content. Hey, man, thank you. Appreciate the kind words. Thank you for being here. Really, really glad that you're here, and I still enjoy doing this every week. Yeah. Thanks, Ben, for being here. Everybody check out Ben's show later. Mr. Ben Coombs, my faithful moderator. He's on tonight, I think. Right, Ben? Yeah. All right. Gonna split. Lauren says, remember you played your first gig with the PT-15 Crab Guts, Pasadena. Sounds good, right? That's right. I remember that. We did a cover gig in Pasadena, that little club. And yeah, with Lauren Gold and Corey from Neil Young's band, Matt Starr and stuff. Yeah, that was fun. That was a minute ago now. Crazy. Was that like pre-pandemic? I think so, right? Yeah. Bonkers. All right. Okay, everybody, have a terrific rest of your Sunday. I'm going to get going next week. Watch this space, YouTube or Facebook, in case I have to change the time. If you don't hear from me, I'll be here same time, same place, but I'll put up a post or two if I got to change the time. I'm coming back from Sweetwater, and if anybody's out in they're in the Midwest right now. She's playing Detroit tonight, but Britt's out playing with an artist named Alexander. Oh, I'm getting his last name wrong. Stewart, I think his last name is. He's opening for Charlie Puth on a tour right now, and they're playing outside Detroit tonight at an amphitheater somewhere. She's in Chicago next week. It's actually my birthday the day after after. So my birthday's 24th, and day after that is Sunday the 25th. I'm supposed to fly back the 24th, be here that night, and then the following day I would be here to do Sunday Live. I may. Oh no, sorry, it's the 24th. Excuse me, I'm screwing this all up. The 24th, I may fly to Chicago, being that it's birthday for me. I may fly to Chicago and then see if I can change my flights that I stay there, go see their show that evening, and then fly back the morning of the 25th, which would be when I'm supposed to be here doing this. But so I'm just trying to work out a fun thing for my birthday. Otherwise, I'm just gonna have a flight on my birthday. So, anyways, I'll put up a post by Friday or so, letting you know if I'm gonna do that. And if I don't, no matter what, I'm going to come back early morning that day, and I'll be in here doing the show at some point. I just might have to push it later to be a little later in the day. It might not be 11:30, 11:45. It might be at 2 p.m. or something on Sunday. We'll see. I'm just not sure. No matter what, I'll do it though. Okay. So watch for the time next week. That was a whole lot of explanation. You must be like, dude, you could have said that in 2 sentences. Love y'all. Have a great week. Thanks for being here. You're the best. Rock and roll.